Hello, project people. A very warm welcome to a new episode of the Project Chatter podcast. It's great to have you back. Remember to hit subscribe on that button. Does that make sense? I don't know if it does. On the podcast player, your favorite podcast players, if you like, and YouTube. And you can check out our friendly faces. Dale, how are you? How's that summer going? Is it still a heat wave over there?
No, it's not a heat wave anymore. I think just getting back, it does make sense. I think it is a button. Maybe it's not, but it's definitely, it says subscribe. So look out for the word subscribe and then like just hit it. It just pretend it's a button business. But no, back to your question. It's over, I think. We had our week of heat wave.
Beautiful.
I think I just managed to get a t-shirt tan, which is fantastic. But no, other than that, we have had hurricanes and downpours and floods. So yeah, interesting times indeed. And definitely, I think there's something called climate change or something like that happening at the moment. It's all happening. But Martin can tell you more about it as well. You're experiencing this, Martin. You're glad it's over, aren't you?
Oh yeah, definitely. I really can't stand the sun, so it's a lot nicer now.
Well, for those that don't know, Martin is a ginger, so obviously sun is a repellent for those types. But it's great to have you guys on, and we have another guest today. We are joined today by Kasper Dixon. How are you, Say?
Hello, everyone. I'm good. All good. Missing the sun already. Yes.
Missing the sun. Well, it's about time it comes down to Australia because we are freezing our butts off down here. It's cold, which you don't usually hear when someone's in Australia, but I'm in the southern part, so yeah, we get snow and stuff, and it's pretty ordinary. Look, let's get into the subject matter. I would love to kick it off with positivity. Obviously, there's a lot to cover today, and I'm told you're one of the most positive people out there in the project community. Now, I don't know if that's a quote, if that's true. Maybe we have to put a survey out there, but I would love to know, where did you get your positivity from? Where did it come from? Is it the grandparents, the parents, the way you were brought up? Let's start there.
A tough one, tough question. I think it's definitely something that I've been aware of for a while. It does help that I am, I think, naturally an optimist, but kind of positivity is something that I definitely force into the work, and particularly kind of my leadership style, the way that I approach challenges, problems. Definitely more of a solution person rather than a problem person. I think that it just overall creates a better working kind of environment. So yeah, I have no idea where it came from originally, but it's definitely something that I was conscious of, kind of my optimistic approach to many things. And I think I've just kind of worked on it and honed on it as almost a leadership philosophy. So yeah, it's a really tricky one. I think I was less optimistic, always definitely optimistic and positive earlier on in my career, and things have just spiraled on from there.
No, it's great. And I think given the situation and the circumstances we were in across the world with this pandemic, it's good to have people that are positive and, forward focused and keeping everyone relaxed. I think having that positive person helps bring people together, and it helps with a different perspective as well. It's easy to point out flaws and faults, isn't it? So let's get into it. I also know we're going to talk about a few things around Six Sigma and Lean today. So I know Dale and I will have a few questions for you, and recognize that you're a black belt. So congratulations for that. So positivity, I'll stick with this for a bit, Dale and Martin and Kasper. Positivity for me, what does that mean to you? Because we've all got different definitions, but when you said force positivity, what do you mean by that?
I think it's just around the idea of focusing on, and I think that this doesn't just go down to individuals and personnel. It absolutely is applicable organizationally too. Generally, I'll kind of bring out an example. When you think of organizations, right, you get deep dives, you get scrutiny on things that generally go not as well as they should be going. People definitely focus on the negative variant or deviant from the norm. I think you can kind of pull out thousands and thousands and thousands of case studies around projects that haven't gone well. And then there's lessons learned, what did we do wrong that time? there's a ton of projects that do really, really well, like fantastically well. They're absolutely smashing schedule and spending less money than other projects. And when you see it at kind of director level progress reviews and things like that, you would present a, hey, how's everything going from the directors? Yeah, everything's going great. We're ahead of schedule. We're ahead of cost. Okay, cool. On to the next project. How are you guys getting on? Oh, terribly. Right. And then 2.5 hours focused on that negative side of projects. So kind of for me, it's something that definitely doesn't get enough airtime. I think positivity has so many benefits to individuals as well as organizations. And I think that, yeah, it's just something that people need to focus on a little bit more in their personal lives. It can definitely benefit people in their personal lives as well as their professional lives. Organizations need to focus on more positive leadership and focus on more of the things that we do well. So yeah, forced positivity, not really like forced positivity, but definitely being conscious of it and working towards a more positive outlook in your day-to-day job, your life, the way that you approach challenges and things like that. I think that for me it just provides better outcomes, personal outcomes, as well as professional outcomes.
Would you say it's something that you prep for? Are you one of these guys like a Tony Robbins that primes himself in the morning, does a few exercises, some stretches, looks at some affirmations, and then goes, and then gets into it? Or is it something you just do in the moment? Is it a situ moment where you just have a positive outlook, as you mentioned?
It definitely comes natural to me. I think it probably comes less naturally to other people, and it comes down to energy, right? I think a lot of people would need to exert a little bit more energy to look at the positives of certain situations. Same as me. I mean, my initial, I think, reaction to anything is what's the positive out of it? And I don't think that that's really a conscious decision of mine. I think it comes down to the optimistic nature of who I am as an individual. But yeah, definitely in a business sense, I think initially for me, my initial reaction is, right, what's the positive of this? Even challenges, things that we're faced with, problems, I generally tend to look for the solution. But in terms of like having ice cold showers in the morning, going for runs at 4 a.m, nah, that's not for me. I definitely get up. Caffeine is pretty much where it lies. That's my morning routine. Just get a cup of coffee in and then attack the day. Yeah.
I thought that was interesting that that you mentioned that it's who you are rather than an attitude. It's part of your identity, which is interesting too. I think that's something to point out. But yeah, I'm one of those guys that needs that priming in the morning and the ice showers and the run. But I actually think, sometimes it's the quality of the questions we ask ourselves as well that determines our outcome and our behavior. So you mentioned you ask the question, what's the positive or what's the outcome of this or the outlook? I think that's a really good way to be positive. I'm going to ask one more before I get into the detail of Lean and Six Sigma, because I guess that also is somewhat related to this conversation. What do you do when you've got a bit of a Star Wars situation where you've got the good force and the positive force, and you get some negative force in a room, and you're battling it out without the lightsaber this time, but at least from a attitude and an energy perspective, right? How do you deal with that?
It's tough. Based on my experience, there tends to be more of the dark side than the light side. So I do kind of enter into rooms, especially in challenging. I mean, I work in major projects. You work with a lot of money. I work in the public sector. So things aren't predominantly driven by profitability, but yikes, it's not our money that we're spending, and we want to make sure that we do right by the public money. We want to make sure that we invest in the right things. I think with that pressure comes emotion, and when, yes, things aren't quite going right, there is a ton of negativity in the room, like from the project team or from kind of external forces. I do feel it is a momentum thing. I do feel that kind of positivity, in a way, if you articulate it in the right way, you can't just kind of overcome negativity with more positivity. You can't just be more happy than someone else and expect them to be just as happy. It's definitely about finding the moment. Yeah, I think you're never going to fix every single problem. But yeah, I do kind of get picked out on it a lot where it is a negative situation and you're trying to approach it in a positive way. I think that people do identify that in sometimes a negative way. So they're saying, oh, you're making light of the situation. We shouldn't be focusing on kind of the positivity here. We should be kind of wallowing for a little bit more. We should be panicking, everyone. We shouldn't be focusing on outcomes. I think that's what people's initial, probably subconscious reaction is to challenges and problems. But yeah, from my perspective, the way that I challenge that is just perseverance. I don't think that you can give up. I don't think that you can be overcome by that. Yeah, from my perspective, you just follow through on what you feel is right. And majority of the time, being positive and focusing on a good outcome, for me anyway, is generally the right course to go down.
Yeah, definitely. I happen to agree with you. I think as well. There's two that I probably use when I do it. Humor and humility, I think, are really great tactics. I don't know, and that authenticity. Obviously, you can't just put on a smile because you're happy and expect everyone else to rise to the occasion. You've actually got to, you do have to bring some light to the situation. I think there's a lot of fear mongering, and people want to build up anxiety so that you fear the outcome rather than work together collaboratively. And I think, especially older, I'm going to say older. What's the word? Maybe the older school ways of managing. I think that younger people certainly do not respond to that fear type based management style, that the authoritarian style of management. So you will do this. They're like, nah, it's all right. I will go over here and play out with Kasper, who seems to be very positive about the outcome and collaborative. And I think that maybe there's some secret sauce in that for anyone listening. Dale, I love that you love this subject too. So let's get you into the conversation.
I do love the subject, and well saved there. Old school thinking.
I was crying.
But no, I agree with you. It's an interesting aspect because I think particularly, I think Kasper, you're alluding to it, that this pressure cooker of environment of projects, right? Regardless of if how big or small they are, there's often pressure to deliver, and more often than not, it's profit margins at stake, etc., etc., and that often brings out the worst in people. And it's interesting because you're doing the opposite, and you've touched on people's reactions to that. And then you go along and you say, okay, well, you got to read the room. And then my first thought is, well, over Zoom or Teams, has that now become a little bit more difficult to tell what the room is feeling? And what do those listening into you say? What do you say to them to say, actually, these are the signs you could look out for? But also particularly, or maybe techniques, maybe it's not something you're looking for because some people don't have their cameras on these days, as we've previously spoken about. That's my first one. Maybe let's stop there and tackle that one first, because a lot of it is, you can, as Val said, you can just be positive, but actually you need to be authentic about it first. And secondly, there has to be thought put into it. You can't just be positive and expect everyone to feed off just because you are, that they should be. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll touch on your question first, and then I think Val made some incredible points that I'd like to come back on. So the first one was just, on kind of reading body language. I do feed off of energy. You need it, I think. Positivity is hard. It's hard to maintain positivity. It's hard to encourage. It takes a lot of effort. So I think that's kind of one of the ways or one of the reasons why people don't follow down that path of positivity, because it is kind of a harder path that does include sacrifice. You have to give something. And it is hard to read people's body language if their camera is off in a room. It's a lot easier to kind of feed off. You know how much to give, how much to kind of set back. Just picking up on the points of authenticity. Absolutely. Striking that balance between optimistic reporting, for kind of, you want to be optimistic and positive, but at the same time, you never want to kind of present that false optimism. Everything's fine. Don't worry about it. Oh yeah, it's cool. Yeah, but you're 150 million down. No, don't worry about it. Things are good. That's completely different to positivity and optimism from my perspective. Truthful and honesty, integrity. I think you used the word, Val. Incredible. But yes, definitely find the balance Be positive around approaching problems with solutions, but definitely don't hide it. Definitely don't sugarcoat it. Yeah, more the approach to positivity from my perspective that truly adds the most value to an organization. Kind of touches on Val's second point, which is on leadership, where yes, the perception of leadership has changed fundamentally over the last like 30, 40 years. It used to be a lot more of the stick. It used to be a lot more of the yelling. That's what people, I think, perceived a great leader being, somebody in charge, you know, but that isn't true leadership. I think leaders are not in charge. They are not in control. They're in charge of they're kind of in charge of the people, or kind of the safety and the kind of the well-being, and making sure that everyone below them is good. They're not actually in charge of those people. They're in charge of making sure that they have everything they need and they are supported in order to deliver. So it's a fundamental shift in that perception of what a great leader is. And I think that nowadays people don't respond to the stick anymore. And a lot of leaders remain silent, where I think the only way that you can deliver positivity is through encouragement, you know. So if you lack the stick, you have to find other ways to encourage people, to drive them, to motivate them. That to me is leadership. And it's really hard to motivate people if you're constantly talking about negative things. Oh, guys, yeah, we're a week behind on schedule, you know. It drags people down, especially on major programs where you're delivering it for 1, 2, 3, 10, 15 years. You have to remain positive. You have to look forward. And yeah, one of the other points is around a kind of positive recognition of things. I think project management as a function is crazy. It's hectic. It's chaotic, when fundamentally the job of a project manager is to provide structure and control. So yeah, that's kind of the other thing that I think really provides support to a project manager. And kind of, well, a positive project manager is, yeah, that ability to just maintain that energy. And then within all of that chaos, just to motivate, encourage, and just make sure that you stop every once in a while and, yeah, just recognize the achievements, because it's so easy. I think sometimes you approach a delivery milestone and you get over that hump and you've delivered it, and you never look backwards. You never go, it's never a celebration moment. It's always almost relief. You're like, oh, phew, we did it. Okay, cool. What's the next challenge? You don't ever stop, look back and go, oh, wow, we absolutely smashed that. You know, well done, everyone. We should recognize that, because those are the things that get you forward.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And it's that, you know, that celebrating success when it happens. And yeah, you couldn't have put it better. Projects are so fast paced that, as you say, you stop for a brief moment in time, but that isn't enough at times. And you often forget how much you've done on projects until the end, and then people just move off again and you don't celebrate it. It's what maybe like a night out or something like that, or big do pre-COVID, celebrate and then on to something else. So cut the ribbon and gone. But I think those little milestones, as you say, it's important to take stock at certain points in time and look back. Now, I know we do want to shift onto Lean and Six Sigma, but just kind of last touching on this positive effect on projects. Now, can you give, I guess, the listeners the types of projects you've worked on in your career so far, and perhaps how you feel, or evidence perhaps if you've seen it, your approach, your positive approach has either impacted, even in a small way, or shifted project delivery into a more positive state so that delivery is better, faster, easier, cheaper, perhaps? Is there anything tangible that you could perhaps share with the listeners?
Yeah, definitely. I think positivity is infectious in a good way. I do think that kind of people look for that spark, that thing in their day to kind of keep them going. And I think it is so hard to kind of get, it's so easy, sorry, to kind of get focused on the negative side of things. But yeah, kind of a little bit about me. I've been working in the rail industry for 14, 15 years now. Delivered a variety of major projects in a variety of sectors within rail itself. So track replacement, station modernization and enhancement, step-free access, heavy civils, major signaling upgrades. I've business management, done a lot of business management working with TfL, but predominantly with an external supplier at the time, Bechtel. Yeah, that's kind of where I got, I think, a lot of my delivery philosophy and approaches is from that Bechtel style of management originally, very early on in my career, and then heading into the tube lines, principal contractor focused delivery, taking on all of that accountability and responsibility, and then through to London Underground and Transport for London. And yeah, kind of, I think that the way that I really kind of learned my trade as a leader and a project manager in that private sector, that focus on super active leadership. I think that taking that through into a environment, a public sector environment like London Underground and TfL helps massively. You can see it. People aren't used to it. People aren't used to the positive approach to things. And it does play a big part. I'll kind of lean into this. One of the things that I am incredibly passionate about is finding opportunities. That's one of the great things that comes out of positivity, is you always look for the good. You always look for what we can do better. It's all about continuous improvement. And that's the fundamental core principle and philosophy that comes from Lean Six Sigma, is identification of opportunities and reduction of waste. And it's not just about fixing a process. It's about changing a culture that focuses on opportunity and looking at how we can do things better. So yeah, one of the things that I'm passionate about is kind of training people up in that philosophy, providing them with that tool set to enact and truly change an organization. And yeah, it spirals. You gain a ball of momentum. So kind of when I started in my Lean Six Sigma journey, I never thought that I would be focused on, I never kind of wanted to build an empire or anything like that on Lean Six Sigma, but it's kind of the more and more I got involved in it and the more positives that I saw from it, the more I just want to encourage other people to pick up the philosophies, understand the tools and the skills behind it. And yeah, that's kind of led me to train hundreds and hundreds of people in the public sector on TfL, specifically in London Underground, in a variety of functions: commercial, project controls, finance, engineering, project management. And yeah, as I said, like I've got people who have continued that journey through. So started as kind of the entry-level yellow belts, and then they like the ideals. It becomes infectious. That same as that positivity. And the idea behind Lean Six Sigma is you identify and follow through on the production of something that gives you a tangible, statistical, data-driven change back, positive change. So yeah, there are tangible effects from positivity. And when you couple that approach, that philosophy of positivity with a structured, statistical and data-driven approach like Lean Six Sigma, I think it's a recipe for success.
No, that's awesome. I love how you segued into Lean Six Sigma as well. But I just want to touch one or two more questions on this positivity topic, because it's something we really explore, Val. And I want to know, because obviously we are in the UK. Is it a cultural thing? Is it, perception? Because if the Brits are negative and you being South African are just a little bit less negative, does that mean you're positive? Or is it, you know what I mean? Is it a perception thing? Because you might go to America and everyone's like, high five, yeah. And, and then you're not positive because you're not as positive as them, maybe. Do you think there's a cultural element to it?
I'd say partly yes, potentially. I know a lot of miserable South Africans. So yeah, I think partly yes. It is definitely the perception. I think initially people see me as different. Yeah, maybe the way that I talk and the way that I approach things is different too. And maybe it just, yeah, gets them to, I think, look more closely at the way that I approach things and be a little bit more, not critical, but just identify the things that I do differently. So it kind of just stands out to them. And then they realize, oh, actually, yeah, you are really positive. But yeah, I do find myself having to there's been a few times where people are like, oh, you can't be that happy, projects like, oh, your project can't be doing that well. And I think that's honestly what drove me into things like Lean Six Sigma, the statistical approach. I haven't found anything that does it the way of quantifying my happiness in real life, in kind of my personal life. But yeah, definitely in a project sense.
Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
I think, yeah, potentially culturally. But no, I think it is a skill that you can kind of develop yourself. It doesn't have to be born into you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is something that you can hone in, practice, and as you say, become habit and something that you can naturally just have. Before I bring in Martin, because he obviously went off screen, his computer had to reboot, and now he's back with us. But just one more from me before I hand to him. Difficult conversations. Now, those listening in go on projects. You have to have plenty of difficult conversations, especially when the shit hits the fan. How do you remain positive when you have to have difficult situations? What are the tips you can give some of those PMs out there going, shit, you know what? I work on a really tough project and I just don't know how in difficult circumstances to have these difficult conversations positively.
It's the answer. Like it is the answer. There's I think it's a lot easier to revert down to the wallowing, as I kind of mentioned earlier. It's really easy to go down that path of just following through and saying, wow, things are really bad. Yeah, things are terrible, and they can get worse, and you can focus on the negative side of things. In terms of kind of how to stay positive and how to approach things positively, I think it's really hard. There are techniques and skills and things like that, but I think fundamentally it's about staying in the right frame of mind and just reminding yourself of what you're trying to achieve. And yeah, those difficult conversations don't just happen in a business sense, also in kind of personal sense. When you're working with direct reports, life happens, right? It gets in the way of a ton of things. And again, it's about finding that balance. So it's about being positive, but not optimistic, overly optimistic. And when you're having a difficult conversation on a personal level, I don't think the answer is everything's going to be fine. That's definitely not what you should say in some situations. Everything's great. Don't worry about it. That's definitely not what positivity is about. It's more about, right, things are not so good now. But we can maybe take this as a learning experience. So what did we learn out of it? I think reflection is the biggest technique you can apply to positivity. That moment of stopping and going, right, what actually went wrong? And then kind of looking at how you can go forward. Because if that path, that way to resolving something is set out and laid in front of somebody, it's a lot easier to follow through. Whereas, you could just focus on, oh, things are bad, aren't they? Yeah, they're terrible. Yeah, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Lay the path out. And I think it's a lot quicker for the people to follow through to a resolution, be that project or personal wise too. So yeah, from my perspective, a ton of skills and techniques and things like that. I won't go too much into that. I would just focus on reflection, and then the things that can be put in place, or the things that can be looked into going forward.
I love it. Keeping it simple. And I love how you keep stressing that there's a difference between positivity and being optimistic. And what we're saying is you don't always have to be optimistic, right? But it's positivity through good and bad times. Martin, you're back with us. Come on. I know you love this topic as well, because you are a Brit, and you love a moan as well. You love to moan at me and Val all the time. So come on. Get in there.
Yeah, I'm having seen your approach in action before. I'm intrigued by the positive approach. Have you ever had instances where it hasn't worked, or maybe certain team members maybe haven't taken you as seriously as you should do? Did you have to adapt your approach at certain times?
Yeah, definitely adapt my approach. Definitely faced with more, I would say, reluctance to accept the messages. I think a lot of the cases, but in terms of adapting my approach, yes, sometimes hone it down a bit, but I would never follow through and completely like change. I don't think I ever have. I mean, everyone gets angry and things like that, but positivity is not about being happy. I think honestly, a positive approach to life and to challenges and to problems makes you a happier person. But positivity does not equal happiness in a lot of cases. But yeah, sometimes that positivity does come out in a joyful way. So when you're presenting certain news in like a happy, positive way in kind of business meetings where people are generally used to a more formal presentation of things, data, status updates, or just in like team meetings. The first time that I meet people, sometimes I have always been, I've always kind of been young for by grade, and I think that definitely does throw people off. So I do feel like, honestly, yes, as soon as kind of I enter a room, then people have a perception. And when I start talking around, hey, come on, everyone, let's focus on opportunities. Let's try and continuously improve. I think that people have another perception, and that perception might be right. Sugarcoating, might not be taking this as seriously as they should do. And I think that has forced me to not focus on kind of bettering or improving myself, but it does definitely set an expectation. So I kind of set myself kind of higher goals and work towards ensuring that I can back up that positivity with statistical analysis or technical knowledge on the subject. So yeah, I think it's super important if you're going to be positive about something and you do lay out a path to resolution of an issue or a challenge. You can't just say it without the skills to back it up. You can't just say it without the knowledge. You can't say everything's going to be all right if you don't know that it's going to be all right. So yeah, fundamentally, I have been in the situation before where kind of earlier on in my career, where the positivity does kind of take over a little bit, because it is about momentum, you know, and you want the best out of something. You want the best project delivery outcomes on your specific project, but willing it to go well doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go well. So I have, in certain situations, maybe gone, right, everything's going to be great, don't worry, we can focus on this, we can focus on that, we'll focus on that. And people have gone, actually, no, we can't do that. And that's kind of driven me harder, I think, into my academic life to focus on, increasing my knowledge base around certain things, my technical knowledge. And you just have to make sure that you back up that philosophy and that really positive drive with the appropriate skills and techniques. So yeah, good question, bud. And the answer is yes, all the time.
Great answer. It's really all about authenticity. It's you see it, people just won't take you seriously if they don't think you're authentic in what you're saying, and then having those kind of metrics to back you up is so important. Another thing you touched on earlier, you got quite vast experience in rail. So given your experience, some of the teams you dealt with, they can be quite tricky people to win over, particularly on the field side. How did you kind of get around this when you first started out? And are there any tips you would give to aspiring project managers to try and win some of the more tricky characters over?
I think that there is a reputation that comes along with the underground. It's, I think, heavily unionized as an environment. But personally, I think, I approach everyone differently. I think good leadership is all about kind of empathy. You empathize to somebody's situation. I think a lot of the time the frustration comes through from people like operators. We'll pick up that as an example, where people would say, like, operators, the end user, the people who are receiving the upgrade, the capacity increase, they are seen as notoriously complex stakeholders, difficult stakeholders. But there's a reason behind it, you know. It's not that these are people just like everyone else, and they face the same frustrations that everyone else does. And from my perspective, I think approaching an individual with the empathy, understanding truly what is driving that frustration, and then working really hard to overcome it. If you truly want to turn in stakeholder management terms, a saboteur of a project into a keen advocate of a project. It's showing empathy. It's understanding what is driving the frustration. And then it's working tirelessly to ensure that you turn that frustration into a positive thing. So you remove the blockers, generally you have the conversation. They say, well, just nobody listens to me. I have to exude this aggressive kind of facade because nobody listens to me otherwise. And it's all about, understanding where they're coming from and then taking it seriously and following it through to a conclusion. Don't make promises that you can't deliver on. That's incredibly important. If you try and approach things in a positive way, I think naturally you would feel like you can fix it. But again, it's kind of coming from a humble and honest approach and saying, look, I will do my best to fix it. I need to understand the facts before I can make any promises, but I understand where you're coming from. So from my perspective, facing tricky stakeholders, the first thing that you need to do is empathy, understand how they're feeling, and then work on a solution. Could be there and then, you could know it, you could have the knowledge and the technical capabilities to deliver it there. And if you don't pretend like you do. Definitely say, hey, I want to fix it. I can't at the moment. I'll go away and I'll come back to you soon. So yeah, empathy.
Great stuff there, Kasper. Some really good points there. And I think it leads to something we've talked about before, Dale, on the podcast. We had episode 73. We talked about responsible project management. Obviously, that takes the environment into the account, but also moral leadership. And moral leadership is defined as, and you'll love this, Kasper, if you haven't heard it before, a leader's behavior that demonstrates superior virtues, self-discipline, and unselfishness. And I think you've demonstrated some of those points today. And I really appreciate your time on positivity. So for anyone who doesn't understand it, get in touch with Kasper. He's taking calls. No, just joking. But you can check out and contact him on LinkedIn. I'm sure he'd love to spread the good word. And we really appreciate having him on the show. Let's get into some technical stuff, because you did mention, positivity without competence is probably dangerous, right? It's like, it's a recipe for disaster, really. Someone comes in, everything's all right, guys, but has no idea what's behind the curtain. Could be problematic. And you're saying, no, you need a black belt or some type of belt. And let's talk about some of these belts we've got. So Six Sigma is a fantastic skill set. I've used it, borrowed it, stole it, kind of retrofitted it to projects, but I've never really gone for the belt. I felt like it was ripping off martial arts, and I thought, no, I'm not getting these belts. A real black belt would be able to kick my ass, but maybe you can in a way that reduces wastage, which is really cool too. I wanted to share the 5 laws of Six Sigma or Lean because I thought they were really cool, and then you can caveat or pivot from there, Kasper, and you can talk about how you got into Six Sigma, your experience, and then I'm sure Dale will have the pointier questions, or even Martin for that matter. So the 5 laws, beyond the basics, the 5 laws of Lean Six Sigma, I am reading this, obviously. Customers are important. Speed, quality, and low cost are linked. You need to eliminate variation and defects and focus on process flow. Data is critical to making sound business decisions, my favorite. People have to work together to make the kinds of improvements that customers will notice. Now, for me, that is why I think what you said at the start was it's infectious, is those laws should apply to everybody in projects. And in fact, you could go as far as saying, okay, Six Sigma is a pretty terrible name, right, for marketing purposes, but what a great set of laws to define how you would operate in a project environment. Kasper, over to you. What do you think?
I think what makes it so good is because it appeals and it resonates with everyone. It resonates with the customer because they want a good product, no matter what industry you're in, manufacturing, construction, rail, project controls. The customer always wants a good product, which is fundamentally or a better product, which is fundamentally what Six Sigma Lean strives to focus on. So Lean and Six Sigma are 2 different philosophies. Lean is focused on, kind of removing waste and the identification of efficiencies, and Six Sigma is more a statistical data-driven approach. So it's all around using statistics, mathematics to identify variations and then reduce those variations. And then you merge the 2. Again, it's a great recipe for success. So I'm a keen advocate of Lean and Six Sigma. It's putting the 2 tool sets together. So yeah, I think that everyone has a vested interest in those 5 laws. It comes from a good place. It helps people do a better job, which I think people fundamentally want to do. And it gives the customer a kind of better product at the end. There's no belt. There's no physical award of a belt, by the way, Val. Unfortunately, I tell people that after they've signed up to the training course, because once they do, they're like, "Where's my belt?" But yeah, I think that it's a great philosophy, right? You got those 5 laws, and everyone wants to do that. But I think what really makes it great for me is it provides a structure. So behind the delivery, it makes it easy to deliver things. I think it makes it easy to kind of focus on what you want to truly achieve. It provides that structure that people crave in order to follow something through from inception through to conclusion. So it follows generally. It follows kind of a methodology, DMAIC, so define, measure, analyze, improve, control. So you define the problem, you measure what that problem is, you then kind of analyze what you just measured, you identify improvements and then lock them in, and then you ensure that you've got long-term control into that. People like following through on that sequential structure because it helps them focus on the things that they truly want to improve on. And it provides them with that kind of constant update that they're progressing through, and they can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So yeah, I think it's the merge of the two that really drives me to it, and other people once they kind of dip their toe into the philosophy, is because it provides a fantastic output that people care about, and it provides you with the structure to make that output actually achievable. So it's that structure, the DMAIC structure. So yeah, that's kind of, I think, why it's appealing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think for anyone who hasn't heard it before, that's a great introduction as well, because not everyone gets these acronyms. You know, you go to these organizations and they do that, to kind of mystify their I guess their knowledge base, but also, this DMAIC approach, we use it down here as well in Australia, and it's something that I think people need a framework to hold on to. And I love the fact that you're defining before you're analyzing. Sometimes we go into analysis before we define what we're actually analyzing. And going back to your point around being positive, I think if you've got a DMAIC background, I mean, you know where the conversation's going to go. You've already done your due diligence. You're saying, well, I've defined, I've measured, and you've done it as a team. And here's some ways to improve. And I think that really does complement your positive attitude. And I actually see, just through this talking, Kasper, I see it as an effective communication style, which is what positivity is actually. And you mentioned that it was adaptive. So I actually do think now it's more about being an effective communicator rather than an attitude. And it's something, it's a way of working. I think that people can try on, that they can implement slowly. No one's expecting everyone on the call or listening to head out tomorrow at work and just start going positive nuts, because that would be crazy. Although you should try it, it'd be fun. And what you want to do is slowly introduce it, like a drip system, and try different methods with different people, right? Getting into this Six Sigma, I've got one more question before I hand over to Dale. So how did you start? How did you get into this? You mentioned you used to work for, was it Bechtel or Becker or something like that? Where did this philosophy come from for you, and how did you initially get involved?
Yes, it was Bechtel. I just want to pick up on one of the things you said, that people generally dive into like the measure or analyze first. They actually dive straight to the solution. 99% of the sessions I have, hey, what's the problem that we face? People generally jump straight to the solution. This is how we fix it, and that's what's so beautiful about the structure is a lot of the times I kind of let that solution conversation play out, and I note down what people's perceived solution to the problem is at the beginning of the journey. And then we follow through the define, measure, analyze, improve. We identify the true kind of the vital few, the true root cause for the problems. We work through in that statistical and systematic way. And then we come to some improvement outcome conclusions. And hey, guess what? They're completely different to the solutions that we guessed at the beginning, which may have had a short-term kind of impact, but longer and medium term, not sustainable, or they don't kind of really drive through and address the root cause. So yeah, that was a really good point of yours, but I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, people generally 99% of the time go straight for the solution. How I got into Lean Six Sigma? Definitely through Bechtel. It was Bechtel's an American management company, and Lean Six Sigma is, Lean comes from Toyota. That was kind of one of the philosophies. Six Sigma was from Motorola and GE, who really drove it from the American side, and then the merging came across. Definitely an Americanized kind of philosophy that came across with Bechtel when they were delivering on tube lines as part of the PPP with Metronet, when we were doing station modernizations and enhancements and track upgrades and things like that, back in London Underground days. It's like 20 years ago, I think. The PPP finally died down, and then tube lines was merged into London Underground, and then projects were merged into TfL. So yeah, it came from, I would say, Bechtel, the American management and consultancy company, and it just resonated with me. I was always keen on it. I was always keen on I think from my perspective, I was always high energy that's never stopped. And I was always keen to do something a little bit extra than just what my job was. And I was just seeking continuous improvement. And I think that it was I found it, and it found me, and it worked. So yeah, I was kind of naturally drawn to just continuous improvement. And then I found this incredible philosophy that focused on providing that structure that I definitely needed, because I was the worst at it before that systematic approach to improvement. I was the first in there with the solution. Hey, I know, why don't we do this? So I did find that it measured me. It allowed me to kind of stop, analyze the situation, and truly focus on what do we need to do in order to address the real problems here. So I think that it was definitely something that, for me anyway, once I had identified kind of like a weakness in my delivery style very early on in my career, it provided kind of a filler to that gap.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, it is an interesting subject, and we haven't actually covered this, believe it or not, Kasper. In the almost 2 years we've done this podcast, we haven't not talked about this subject. So you are the first, which is great, and we're humbled to have you on board, and your passion and enthusiasm around the subject matter is great. I will ask one more because Dale was doing something. I don't know what he was doing. What is the belt structure, and why do they go with belts? Do you know why? Is that just to help people guide them through kind of, be like high school, grade 1 to 6, or whatever it is? What's the process around these belts, and how do you attain them?
So you go up in the belt system. You go up in the belt system through kind of a release of training information and complexity of delivery. Mm-hmm. Six Sigma is complex. It is challenging, and I think that it's a little bit, it kind of scares people off once you get into kind of the heavy statistical formulas. I think starting from scratch, if it was just a one size fits all Lean Six Sigma course, I do think that it would scare a lot of people off. And I think that the phased implementation of knowledge throughout almost a structured sequence of increasing complexity of information works really well for its adoption into organizations. You don't want 1,000 black belts doing statistical analysis on absolutely everything. Oh, where's that Excel spreadsheet? Let's kill it with statistics. You do need people who focus at a high level, yes, but you absolutely need people at the lower level focusing on kind of implementing real change. So lean around that philosophy of identifying waste. It's really easy once you start going down that Lean Six Sigma complex statistical journey to focus on the big hitters, to go right into the detail. But a lot of the time, the low-hanging fruit are, for an organization, the most effective. So I think that the belt structure, A, it helps getting people into it, and B, it helps with its adoption into organizations because you need the layers. So you start off with yellow belt, green belt, black belt. The yellow belt is definitely less complex. It's focused on providing the candidates with the tool set. So it is fundamentally management tools that can be used at work and in your personal life. So I've used priority-based matrices before to select the next hotel I was going to when I was going on holiday and stuff like that. I'm a nerd, my bad.
Wow. Geekle it.
But yeah, you use it not just for delivering a process improvement project, but I mean, I still speak to people now that I trained like 6-7 years ago, and they say they're still using it in their day-to-day roles now that they've even left organizations and they're joining consultancies. A lot of the tools that you learn stay with you throughout your career. But yeah, the yellow belts are provided with a tool set that allows them to influence a positive change, identify waste. They know what types of waste to look for. It gives them the tool set to encourage nice collaborative behavior with the team in order to identify the root cause of a problem, be it waste, reduce that waste, increase the efficiency, get the pull of value through the process. And then green steps it up in terms of complexity. You throw in a little bit more statistical analysis, a little bit more tools in order to truly hone down into the root cause. And then black belt is, a lot more complex. So for my black belt certification, you've got to go through an exam, and then you've got to deliver 2 projects to the British Quality Foundation for your certification. Your projects take around a year each, and you have to show a quantifiable value output at the end. So project selection is absolutely key. I've seen a lot of people go 7-8 months down that road and go, oh, yikes, I don't know if this is the right project. And then you start questioning yourself. So certification is stringent, and I think for good reason, because you want to make sure that the tools that are given to the person, they can truly use them in the best way to deliver the best results for an organization.
Fantastic. Dale, over to you, mate.
Thanks, Val. Kasper, did you notice how when Val came back for his second spell, how positive and energized he was? So you're definitely rubbing off on the present company here as well. I love it. And Val, you asked what I was doing. I was actually writing down everything Kasper was saying so that I could go back and research all of this stuff because it's gold. But there are a whole bunch of things I do want to ask. What is, so you've mentioned the sort of the path that people would go through if they did Six Sigma, and it's not one of the things that you'd normally associate with project managers, going to Six Sigma. I mean, I know quite a few that have done it, but typically they go for, their Prince 2s, their PMIs, their PMPs, etc., APM. Is it for all types of project managers, or is it something that you're going, hey, you know what, if you want to be a project manager, this is something you should be looking to do over and above what the industry standards say you should be doing?
Such a good question. And it's not just applicable to people either, Dale. People do say, yeah, but does it fit within rail? Does it fit within construction? So when I did my master's degree in project management, and my the subject that I picked for my dissertation was the application of Lean Six Sigma principles in the rail construction environment. And I think the application of Lean and the philosophy of Lean hasn't really, it started to scratch the surface in construction only now. It's a late adopter. Every industry Lean Six Sigma is applied to. It's an incredibly flexible tool set. And the answer out of the vast majority, I've still yet to find a scientific or academic paper that shows the conclusion being Lean Six Sigma is not applicable to this function. It's applied across the NHS, across construction. Manufacturing is definitely where it came from, looking at nuts and bolts, millions and millions and millions of inputs, and then identifying the statistical change in those bolts. But the philosophies, the fundamental framework of Lean Six Sigma is 100% applicable to construction, 100% applicable to rail, and I would say the vast majority of industries. In terms of its applicability for project managers, so in the finance industry, like if you look at vacancies now for project deliverers, project managers, Barclays, HSBC, and things like that, they are becoming more aware of the benefits from Lean Six Sigma. So it's not as an essential, but at the moment they're saying, hey, knowledge in Lean Six Sigma and especially certification in Lean Six Sigma is desired, because truly what you get out of that is an individual who hasn't just delivered a tangible cost-saving benefit to an organization in the past. What I was talking about is it's that change of culture. It's the change of your perception of how you approach work. going forward, where people do look at continuous improvement. Those tool sets are there. Yes, great. You know how to analyze things. You know how to use certain like charts to articulate and tell a story. But it's all about that approach. It's about that philosophy of identifying the waste. So I would say at the moment, yes, from my personal opinion, it's 100% applicable, and it should, every single project manager is mandatory. I just think that the industry are slow adopters to things that truly add value. And again, it goes back to my original point of people not focusing on the good enough, people not focusing on the positives. People always want to focus on the negatives. And let's deep dive in case study what went wrong, rather than, hey, wow, that project had tons of Lean Six Sigma people on it, and they were focused on improving processes and identifying waste and saving tons of money. And I don't think that it gets the awareness or the recognition, because people go, oh, that's great, cool, let's move on and let's talk about the projects that are failing.
Awesome. Now, the make, right, the acronym, some might say, well, actually, that just makes sense. It's just logical. I don't need to go and do some sort of course and do all these fancy belts and colors and everything like that. What more can they get other than these five laws? I mean, you spoke about specific techniques and things like that, but is anything stopping anyone going and Googling all of this and getting all of this information? Why do they need to be trained?
No, I would 100% encourage everyone to go out there and read all about it and apply some of the thinking behind Lean. Yes, it is an amalgamation of philosophies. It is an amalgamation of tools from a variety of different things into a cohesive tool set that can be used. Do you need training? And that's kind of one of the reasons why I went into training. It was definitely not something that I had. It was definitely not in my development path. I never thought, oh, wow, I love training people and I want to be a trainer. That was never my outset or goal. It just happened naturally, where people were like, hey, I really like your approach to things. Can I learn a little bit more? And the more information I provided to them, the more intrigued they became. And then I said, well, I think I can do this. So I trained myself. I got trained myself to be the trainer. And then I started training other people into it. And it gained momentum from there. So yeah, one of my motivations to become a trainer was to remove the cost element of the training, so we could deliver it myself for like next to nothing. Yes, it's a sacrifice of my time, but it saves an organization a lot of money. And yeah, you kind of, from that perspective, yes, anyone can learn it. I think that all that the training does is that it focuses that learning onto the key points, the key points that you can turn into relatable items that you can apply in your day-to-day work, which is, I think, the challenge around Lean Six Sigma is, how do I make it relatable to what I'm doing? How do I make it relatable to a finance manager, a commercial manager, a project controls manager, a project manager, a construction manager? That's the real key through the training, I think, is it provides that relatability. If you just search Lean Six Sigma training on Google, it'd be very hard to find that relatability, and people might feel, oh, this might not be for me. But once you start talking about it and you start getting into the training, you very quickly find out, wow, it is applicable. I can do this, I can do that, I can learn about this and apply it, not just on the project that I'm delivering, because the training is a portion of the accreditation towards your belt. You also have to deliver a process improvement project. That makes it incredibly easy to justify the spend to a business when you say, hey, spend a little bit, but I can guarantee I'll mentor the individual through the delivery of a project that identifies waste and reduces cost to you. So give me a little bit here and I'll give you a lot at the end. It makes my case, my justification case, a lot easier.
No, that's awesome. You mentioned cost, you mentioned money, you mentioned accreditations. Now, those listening in, is it like a master's or something like that, when once you qualify, well, you could potentially expect an uplift in potential salary remuneration? Or is it not something that, because some of those listening in will go, it's great to get all of this, but does it actually drive my career directly or indirectly? So it's one of those where, you get well, I don't know if it happens today anymore, but historically, now that you got your MBA, you can expect maybe a 15, 20 grand increase, by either having a promotion in your current company or moving elsewhere. Is Six Sigma something like that? Or is it indirect, where the skills you inherit improve your productivity, your output, your contribution to your craft and your profession, and inherently you progress in your career?
It makes you a more marketable asset. Absolutely. Having the accreditation on a CV, you're a more marketable employee. But yes, fundamentally, it's an indirect development route to go down. But I truly believe that it's not about just having it on your CV and becoming a more marketable employee. The skills, the techniques, the philosophies, the ability to change culture, the ability to influence qualitative and quantitative things within a project or your life. I think, as I said before, it's not just a short-term change. You definitely hang on to the vast majority of the learnings throughout your career. So I do think that you become a better employee through going through the training. So yeah, it's kind of sounds like I'm selling a training course. Like I'm not sure, not available for bookings for organizations. But yeah, from an individual's perspective, I would always recommend learning into Lean Six Sigma. And even if you don't pay for the training course, I think that there are a lot of things that you can get out of studying for it. So yeah, study the philosophies, try and understand its relatability to you in your industry as a project professional, because I can guarantee the links are there. And yeah, I can almost guarantee that it'll make you a better employee in some way, shape or form. You won't waste your time studying the philosophies.
Well, folks, if you want to book Kasper Dixon, get in touch at info@projectchatterpodcast.com. No, just kidding. That is awesome. And I agree with you. You shouldn't get a certification, accreditation, a degree, master's, whatever the case may be, just to have the name that you've done it. I do want to touch on something that I have been involved in historically around lean, value stream mapping. I found it a remarkable methodology to go through and identify areas where you can actually reduce waste. Now, I've picked that one specifically because I've been through it. I'm sure there are other techniques as well, Kasper. But I wonder if we could just go down that one specifically because, well, selfishly, I'm quite intrigued. So have you used that before? Is it something you applied, or the other technology techniques that are similar?
Yeah, definitely. I think process mapping in general is something, again, is applicable to every single project, every single industry. Mapping what you do in a very detailed way allows you to identify it. It literally puts it in black and white in front of you. So process mapping, just as a principle, I'll kind of take us through what that is. What I ask people generally to do in my process mapping workshops, and value stream mapping is just a detailed way of doing that. So you kind of add a little bit more complexity to it. But fundamentally, you map the process. You start from step one and you ask the question. So one of the techniques that you learn in Lean Six Sigma is 5 whys. Some people through university and things like that might be aware of the philosophy, the technique, the 5 why technique. Again, it's Lean Six Sigma is that amalgamation of things, techniques, tools, etc. Right? So people might have heard of the 5 whys, and it is exactly what it says on the tin. You ask why 5 times. So you sit with a blank piece of paper, nice collaborative workshop, and it's nice to actually be external to the process. And you get in to this group of strangers and you say, hey guys, what do you do? And take me through your job, just to identify the waste. And they say, always, guarantee. I always ask the first question. You got any problems in your process? Any waste there? Nah, well-oiled machine. Cool, let's map it out. Let's see what we do. So it's like, yeah, cool. Get in the morning, sit down, check my emails, right? And then you literally write down the detail in a box, right? And you flow the process out. So you step 1, sit down, check my emails, Oh, and then what happens? Like, oh yeah, I send this email through, blah, 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 blah. And you track the amount of time every single process step takes. And by the end of this articulation of the process, you apply some simple principles. So value add or non-value add, VA, NVA. So it's kind of the steps. Does the customer want it? Is it right first time? There's a few hints to that. So generally, if a word starts with RE, just whilst people are process mapping, that's always a red flag. So I always kind of circle that, you know, oh, I review this document. And I would always circle that process step. Any word that kind of starts with RE is just a red flag for waste, by the way, just a hint to people, if you're thinking about process mapping. So yeah, you're going through this process that is a well-oiled machine and there's zero waste in it with this group of people, and they review documents and then they send it and then they revise their numbers. And then kind of once you go through that process map and you truly articulate the journey, there's some other things that you can do with process mapping, like it's called process stapling. You staple yourself to a product and you kind of follow through on a product, not physically, you don't staple yourself. You know, like
I was going to say,
staple something. Definitely, definitely not physically staple yourself to it. And going to Gemba, so going to the place of work and truly following the product through on the process is another technique that you can use for process mapping. But what it does is just simplifies it and it pulls the waste out. A lot of the time you have to ask the 5 whys to get the detail out, because you would say to somebody, explain your job. Oh, I sit down, I read my email, I send a, so you can process map the contract award process, you know, for a competitive tender, and they can be like, yeah, I get my contract sent over to me, I sign the contract and then I send it back, you know, 3 steps in the process. And then you say, well, why do you get it? You know, how do you get that? You ask the kind of the what, the who's, the whys. And then it's, oh yeah, the guy down on the 2nd floor kind of actually walks it up the stairs. They print it out first, right? Oh yeah. Sorry, no, he has to receive the email and then he prints it out. So he's got to walk over to the printer, but the printer's on the 5th floor. Okay, yeah, so you add that as another process step. So your 3-step process has now become doubled. It's 6 steps, right? Because that person downstairs walks upstairs to the printer and then they print the contract out and then they go back downstairs and they have a coffee and they leave the contract on their desk, you know, and then you start mapping that all out. You identify the waste in that process and you go, guys, these first 15 steps, let's cut them all out. And then just set up this, I don't know, like central repository where once a contract's in and it's complete, you upload it to a, I don't know, SharePoint site or something. And then the person gets flagged with an autonomous email that allows them to go into that central repository and pull the contract off. So that's the kind of the power of process mapping. It's making people aware. They're using it for identification. So you use it predominantly, like kind of measuring the process or identifying something. I think it's just a super powerful tool, visual tool of identifying waste and measuring a process.
Yeah, no, I agree. Having actually sat through it and done it, I agree with you. Now, last one, just on tools, and I'm going to steal one of Val's questions. He loves asking this. Are there any free software tools that can help you process map out there that you're aware of that you can share?
So process mapping, I wouldn't, so there are tools that you can use, but you don't need it for process mapping. Definitely not. Just the like Visio and things like that, you can use process mapping. Literally Post-it notes work best. I always feel a more tactile approach to process mapping because it's meant to be collaborative. Get people ownership into it. Let them touch the product and then they feel inherent ownership in it. So I would always recommend for process mapping, use Post-it notes, because it's a lot easier. You don't need Visio or anything like that, Microsoft Visio. In terms of other tools, I use a piece of software called Minitab, statistical analysis software. A lot of people define it as Excel on steroids, and that helps with a lot more detailed statistical stuff. But to start out your Lean Six Sigma journey, no, you don't need anything. Excel helps a little, I guess. But all that you need is you just need to follow the structure. Everything else can be done with just like basic stationery.
No, that's awesome. What about this virtual world? Any tools to help in the virtual world, or again, maybe just a camera against a wall or something? Or is it?
I did find it super difficult. So some of the training sessions that I've done, like the first few training sessions that I did, like post lockdown, were really difficult because high energy in my training sessions. I generally, for like a yellow belt session, I'd have 3 2-hour sessions broken down because I like to discuss projects, the projects that they're going to be delivering, the candidates. I generally have like a cohort of around like 9-10 people. And when you get like 8, 9, 10 people in a room together, you kind of, you generate a buzz, right? The momentum, the energy. The energy in the room. And it's always like every single tool that I explain, I go up to a flip chart, you know, and then we talk about it and how to apply it and stuff. And I didn't actually realize how much I relied on the flip charts until I delivered the training online. I was like, frick, I got no flip chart, like chalkboard here. What do I do? So the first session was kind of clumsy. And then the second one, I started using like the Microsoft on Teams. You got the board, the whiteboards. I was using kind of the virtual whiteboard and stuff. So yeah, in terms of online tools, virtual whiteboard is absolutely essential. You can have a physical one like behind you on a camera. So sort of any sort of board, I would say, is fundamental to basic application of Lean Six Sigma on a project. Yeah.
Yeah. That's visualization, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
But you know who also likes a flip chart or a whiteboard is Val. And he's been listening in there, and I can see the hamster wheel turning quite a lot. Val, I'm sure you got a couple before we head to the end of the pod.
Thanks, Dale. Yeah, of course. Kasper, yeah, an actually observation when you mentioned about process mapping, I did some on a UK rail project some time back when I was bidding for, I think, Deep Tube, if you remember that. And I was looking at mapping one of the existing rail infrastructures, and they had such a collection of amazing Visio process diagrams, but they didn't all integrate. And I really feel like, particularly in engineering and design, you know, you mentioned the RE, which I thought was really interesting, that anything with RE is kind of like, yeah, we should circle that. And I think you're absolutely right. And if you apply that to systems and tools, because we were talking about tools as well, I think you can do the same thing, not necessarily RE, but any enterprise tool, because none of them really manage the workflow by process. And I think there's a gap or an opportunity in the market for someone to take the engineering process flow. And I think there is some tools that do that, like Bentley ProjectWise and a few other things for design, let's say, but they're only looking at one discipline. Whereas if a Six Sigma guy, Kasper, defined the requirements for a system, you would do it by process, but an integrated process, right? End to end with minimal wastage. Then someone like Dan Patterson, Dale, could, shout out to him because he's obviously off today, he could potentially build a workflow and a system around that. And I think that would be a far cooler product than some of the things that we're seeing out there in projects today. It's just an observation, Kasper. I don't know if you had anything to comment on that. Any thoughts on that?
I think, yes, I think that there is so many ways to improve processes that just are overlooked. I think a lot of people focus on just kind of doing their normal jobs. So yes, definitely integration of flow, integration of, I would say, especially cross-function. I think BIM has attempted in some areas. I think that its adoption has been slower than it should be. I think that BIM is a phenomenal thing that projects should definitely get more involved in. And BIM does try to incorporate and kind of integrate a ton of different ideas from different functions and things together. So yeah, I think the integration piece is generally something that could add a ton of value to a lot of projects.
There we go. So get in touch with Kasper on, no, just joking, I don't have your phone number. But I do like whiteboards, as Dale said. So, you know, my favorite whiteboard, and if you've tried it, Kasper, is Miro. It's like Teams whiteboard on steroids. It's my favorite go-to collab tool for the virtual people out there, remotely stuck at home, perhaps in lockdown, looking for a way to use, or any excuse to put a post-it anywhere. I would check out Miro. I don't have any associations with the company, obviously, but I just love its interface. Now I'm going to hand off to Martin for our feature of tonight's podcast. Martin, over to you.
Thanks, Val. Yeah, this is our feature. It's called Defend the Indefensible. It's where we invite our guests to defend a ridiculous statement for 30 seconds. It's just inspired by some of the ridiculous things we've all heard over the course of our careers. So yeah, if you're willing and keen, we can make a start.
Let's do it.
Positivity there. Great. So, Kasper, you have 30 seconds to defend the following statement. We don't need positivity on projects. We need realism. Discuss.
Yeah, I mean, realism and positivity, interesting. Yes, I think, I know I've been talking about positivity a lot on this podcast, but fundamentally my passion is around realism. I do think that they aren't really conflicting ideologies, but I'll go along with it. I do think that sugarcoating things does harm projects. I do think that we should have more real reporting, and I think that kind of focusing on negatives and kind of being real about the situation that we're in definitely helps projects more. It helps them kind of understand the situation that they're in, understands the gaps, and it kind of makes sure that people don't fall through those pitfalls. So sometimes kind of focusing on the solutions and the betterment of a project is sometimes a deterrent to our progression, because if we're kind of focusing on the goals and the outputs, then who's looking at all of the things that are going wrong, right? So we definitely need to focus on the things that are going wrong. I think that we need to focus on more kind of a real approach to what's achievable. So kind of any project schedule that we get, definitely don't drive to kind of setting things that are stretch targets, because we more than likely will never, ever, ever deliver those. I would say that kind of we just need to add a little bit more conservatism to our schedules. We need to be real about what we can deliver. Just based on past experience, we're all terrible at delivering projects, right? You read about it in the news all the time. Pretty much every single project that you read about fails. So yeah, I think we should just accept the inevitable, plan to fail, because that's what every single project does. It makes sure that we're focused on the right things, the most important things, the things that everyone talks about.
Thanks a lot for that. Cheers. Before you go, we've got time for one more feature. It's called Fiverr. 5 quick-fire questions all about yourself. So again, if you're willing, let's give it a go.
Yeah, cool. What did you guys think of the realism thing? Were you bought in? Were you buying into the realism? Are we setting ourselves? Are we setting our targets too high?
I think you're right, Dixon. I don't think there was much. I don't think there's different difference. It'd be hard to distinguish the difference between positivity, because realism is just stating facts, right? So you can still do that and be positive, but yeah, you did well. You did well.
As a dour Brit, I loved it.
Yeah, you were positively negative.
Brilliant. So, question 1. Would you rather spend your day with people or technology?
People, 100%.
What's more important, time, cost, or quality?
Whew. I think everything leads to cost. Quality leads to cost. Time leads to cost. I'm going to go ahead and say cost.
Interesting. What's the best book you've been gifted?
Oh, it was a book. They made a Netflix series about it, so I'm not as proud. But it was all about kind of organizing your personal life. It had a lot of stuff that I've taken into the way that I live my life. It kind of monoing your life. I don't know if you guys have heard about the philosophy. So it's a bit embarrassing, but it's kind of focusing on Mark Zuckerberg and some successful CEOs. I should have just said the autobiography of Elon Musk. I should have just said that rather than the embarrassing one. But yeah, just on the point quickly, the Mark Zuckerberg thing, he wears the same t-shirt, like the gray polo shirt. It's called a mono philosophy, because he says he makes so many decisions in his working life that he wants to spend less time worrying about the decision making of clothes and lunch too. He eats the same lunch every single day and things like that. And I didn't try
Obama does that as well.
Yeah, really?
Barack Obama. Yeah, he does the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that like a lot of people see ridiculously in it, but I do eat pretty much the same lunch every single day. I've added a ton more structure into my personal life out of that. But yes, the Elon Musk biography was pretty awesome, inspiring dude.
I could see Val's face perking up when you said that. So very good.
Okay.
Next, what's the biggest mistake you've made on a project?
Flip.
Be honest.
Oh gosh, where do I start?
Come on.
I've made so many.
Be realistic as well.
I've made so many. Oh yikes! I don't even know if I can pick one. There are a lot. I don't know. I think probably the biggest general mistake that I've made is kind of that I've tried to work on is no, I wouldn't go down there. I don't know. Hard one. Pass. I'll have to come back to it. What is the biggest mistake I've made in a project? Oh man, I've got some real belters too. Cool. I'll come back to that one.
Okay,
Martin.
come back to it. Okay, last one. If you could choose to spend the day with anyone, past or present, who would it be and why?
So let me go back to that previous question. I know one. So it was the mistake that I made was not challenging it. It was at oh God. So you can actually go there. It was Osterley Underground Station on the Piccadilly line for people who were in London. I did the station modernization and enhancement there. It's got some architectural background behind the actual station and the tower, blah, 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 blah. But what we had to do was we were kind of refreshing the platforms. It's an outdoor platform, and we were installing brand new lights. And on both sides of the rail, both sides of the platform, there is embankments. And oh man, it's something that to this day, I definitely should have challenged. We installed these absolutely crazy retaining walls cut into the banks, and we had hundreds of bricklayers out over weekend possessions installing these ridiculously like kind of knee-height retaining walls. There was definitely a better way. They were hand digging like cubic meters of soil and lumping it out through wheelbarrows. Like everything was manual labor. It was the retaining walls were brick built. They didn't look particularly nice. I think that there was a much slicker, more efficient way of retaining the banks rather than manually digging it out. I think that cost us a lot more money than we should have. We didn't need the closures on the weekend. So yeah, the retaining walls at Osterley, they're still standing. If people want to have a look, you can go and see these ridiculous walls. There's loads of them up on the platform supporting the bank, the knee-high bank around these lampposts. It was definitely a better way to autonomize that the digging and the retaining walls. There was definitely a better solution. So yeah, I still sleepless nights over that one, Martin. Thanks for bringing that one back.
Intriguing. I'm quite interested in going there now. Okay. Last question. So if you could choose to spend the day with anyone, past or present, who would it be and why?
Oh yeah.
Now you've had time to think.
Yikes. I feel like I'm just saying these because we're literally just discussing them, Obama and Elon Musk. I would say like those are two people who I'd love to. There's so many. Again, it's a super long list of people. Yeah, it's super inspiring. Yeah, so I kind of go for those two.
Nice. Thanks a lot.
Just like in the face of adversity, you know, the way that they've just achieved so much. Like how many times has Elon Musk been told, no, you can't do it, you know, and they're just like, going to do it anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's actually freaking done it, you know, he delivers on a lot of his promises. I'm not going to say all of them. Some of them have been stinkers, terrible, undeliverable from the start. And a lot of that time, it comes down to that perseverance, you know, I can do it. I will make a difference. I will change something. And a lot of the no's, I think, motivate people to work even harder. And I think he's one of those people. And it resonates with me, you know, if somebody says, no chance, over optimistic, right? Theme of the show. It drives me, it kind of gives me that personal goal, right? I'm gonna teach you, I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna make that happen. And yeah, I think he's done it just on a much grander scale. So yeah, not like the most amazing human being in the world, but just the way that he approaches that negativity and turns it into something that I think fundamentally is looking at accelerating at least the growth of the civilization. It can be nothing but a good thing, right?
Agreed. Kasper Dixon, it feels like we're just getting started and warmed up on the conversation and time has flown. But I want to say a huge thank you to you because you've jumped in last minute and we've got so much positivity and value out of this conversation. It should have happened a long time ago, but we know you're busy on, in your day job and projects, and we're so glad you've taken the time out to spend it with us and share some of your insight and experience. But before we let you go, are there any final thoughts you want to leave the listeners with?
Well, firstly, yeah, absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks, guys, for the invite. Had an absolute blast. Seek out the waste. Don't accept the norm. Challenge everything. There is always a better way to do something. Take the retaining walls at Osterling as an example.
Val, final thoughts from you?
No, thanks, Kasper. It's been great and a pleasure to have a new topic and such enthusiasm on the show. I think people will come back to this show again and again. You're now part of the furniture, so you can be proud of this one at least, Kasper. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Well, folks, that's all the time we have. Remember to hit subscribe before you go, and a massive thank you once again to our guest, Kasper Dixon. Thank you all for listening. Till next time, we say stay safe, be disruptive, and have fun doing it. From me, Val, and Martin, it's bye for now.